What's up, guys? This is Pete Cowters Clark, and welcome to episode number 74 of the Carrot Poker Podcast. Today's episode is entitled Random Questions from a Random Guy, and the backstory here is I have a random guy on the line who emailed me a couple of weeks ago and wanted to ask a few questions that were generated from his study group. We did an episode like this pretty recently, and I think it went down quite well. So Justin here has messaged me and wanted to do the same thing. So we have Justin on the line. How's it going?
It's going good, thank you.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, and thanks for getting in touch. It's always nice when people reach out from the poker community who, you know, I don't have any links to. They just sort of cold reach out because they've read I think you'd read the Grinders Manual, and you guys have been using that in your study book, in your study group, right? And then that's how you sort of heard about me. So thank you for getting in touch, and I'm looking forward to taking these random questions. I hope they're not going to be too obscene.
No, nothing obscene. I'm very thankful for the guys with the study group. Right away, they introduced me to the Grinders Manual, and your book and your work has just been like a central kind of thing for all of our studies, and we reference back to that all the time. I don't know if you mentioned, but one of the guys in the group is a student of yours.
Yeah.
That was that gets brought up all the time. What are you guys' interests for resources of coaching, training sites, or videos? And why not just get a coach? And who would y'all think is a good coach to get? And I think it was like a unanimous thing. Like everyone wants to get Carroters as a coach.
I've obviously done a good job of brainwashing them through my podcast and books then. Awesome. That's what I like to hear. It's very kind of you to say. Okay, so you guys are all sort of mostly micro stakes, small stakes players then?
Yeah, that's right. All just trying to learn and improve it. But there is everyone's kind of like the solid grinder type. They all stay regularly active, and we post our results and our goals and what we're all working on.
Good. I mean, study groups are just such an amazing resource. I think that, especially if you're all learning if you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, and you've got the same kind of coach or coaches that you normally ingest the material of, then it keeps a real consistency. I think that's definitely important. I think something that can go wrong sometimes in study groups is, you get guys that are like, oh, well, this stronger player who plays 50 NL and I only play 10 NL said to me that we should actually do this with our range in this spot, and now I'm confused. And I'll be like, well, why do you believe him? Like, just because he plays 50 NL. So I think if you're all studying from the same place, it's going to really keep that rigidity, that consistency that you're going to need, because poker's confusing enough as it is, right? Without sort of this blind leading blind, everyone looking at different resources and misapplying it. So I think that's great, man, that you all have a similar direction. Good. Okay, so let's get into the questions. We've got 10 mandatory questions as you described them, and then a couple of questions that we may get to at the end. Who knows what they're going to be. Maybe those are the obscene ones. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll intentionally answer really slowly so we don't get to them.
I think we have some good questions for you.
Awesome. I'm excited. So let's get started. Hit me with question number 1. Just to clarify, guys, I have never met Justin before. I have no idea what's coming here. If this ends up being like some kind of prank, I'll probably just roll with it and publish the episode anyway. Let's go.
All right, so my first question is, as a poker professional, what qualities and abilities do you have that aspiring professionals should seek to emulate? And what would you recommend to help develop those qualities and abilities?
Oh man, that's a really tough question, because I could, right off the bat, I'm thinking about a ton of attributes that I don't have and wish I had that would make me more successful and make me better at actually being in this industry full time. But I guess that's kind of always my mindset. Is like I tend not to think about too much about what I'm doing right. I tend to always think about what I could do better and like where my weaknesses are. So I guess that would be one in and of itself, like this idea that you're always improving and what are your weaknesses. I think like being sensitive, I guess, to your own weaknesses and knowing where they are and being able to prioritize maybe the top 2 to 3 things that you should be working on every week or 2 weeks, and moreover having those as fluid things that can change over time as you get better at them, then introducing new things. I think that's really important, just having like 2 to 3 goals that you're working on at every time that you know are the most relevant goals for you. I think a lot of aspiring players have like the big goal, like, they're dreaming about I want to be crushing 200 NL, I want to be providing for my family, and I want to quit my job, or I want to do this on the side and go on 3 vacations a year, and they see the kind of holy grail, the end goal, but they don't have a clear path as to how they're going to get to that. So I think just linking things up step by step and climbing up the ladder rung by rung instead of just like trying to vault all the way to the top is pretty important. Other things that I think I have, God, I'm trying not to sound like arrogant here. I guess like a love of the game is really important, like an absolute curious fascination is the way I would put it. A lot of really successful players have only got to where they are today because they are absolutely head over heels for poker. Like they're obsessed. Like they think about poker all the time. They're constantly curious, and it's not just like I want to make money, I want to achieve my goals, like that kind of driven obsession. It's like an intricate obsession, like a little boy taking apart the vacuum cleaner accidentally and looking at all the little bits. It's that kind of like, oh my god, what is this contraption of poker? It's so complicated. What do all the little bits do? How can I understand how they all fit together? I think it's that, and then a logical progression of like how to actually get from A to B to C, then eventually get to Z, not just like jumping all the way there. I think those two things are probably like off the top of my head anyway, things that have really helped me.
Okay, very good. The next question I'd like to ask you is, well, one of my favorite quotes of yours is, repeatedly finding these spots to make some small changes to your sizing is something that separates great players from good ones. What other skills would you say separates good players from great ones?
Mental game. So good players will have generally a decent grasp of the game. They'll have the fundamentals down. They'll have more than that. They'll be able to exploit the competition. They'll be a step ahead of the average reg who's breaking even, obviously, and that's why they're not breaking even. That's why they're winning if they're a good player. Great players, those the guys that can stand the test of time, survive variance, having a big enough win rate to actually stay in there long term. These are guys that are really robust. They're guys that can get kicked in the face and just keep getting up again. They have grit, so they have this long-term desire to continuously move forward in the face of adversity. So regardless of whether times are good or bad, results-wise, great players are able to keep getting up again. Maybe they need to take a couple of days off or a week off sometimes if things are really getting to them, if real life interferes, who knows. But I'd say in general, that's the biggest thing, is that grit and that resolution and that determination. There's so many quote-unquote good players, and I would call them good technically, but when their mental game is bad, it's just like, when they're doing well, they can play A game when they're running good, but as soon as they start to run bad, it like collapses and their game just falls apart. They either stop putting in volume, or they stop putting in good volume, or they put in too much bad volume, or something like that. So I think that's a big part of it. Is there anything else that separates the great players from the good ones? Probably, as much as I kind of hate to say this, there's like some kind of just absolute clarity of thought. Like, great players can think crystal clear without inconsistency. They can follow a logical train of thought without making assumptions and without thinking unstatistically. The problem with good players who are not great is that they allow unstatistical thoughts to creep into their mindset, and these can be big assumptions or overgeneralizations or too much specificity in a hand analysis. And when you're no longer thinking statistically, you're no longer assigning frequencies to things, that can get you in a lot of trouble. So a great player will have a train of thought that generally goes, in this spot, X section of villain's range is discounted slightly, Y section is discounted more, and this section is almost impossible but will show up sometimes against the bulk of his range. My hand wants to take A or B action because this will maximize EV, and here are the reasons why. There's just it's like presenting a really good like dissertation or something, if you imagine that. Like, the best grades I ever got in university, for example, in my philosophy degree, were when I put forward an argument that made sense all the way through. It didn't have to be like really groundbreaking. It didn't have to be like in any way glamorous or amazing. It just had to be like step by step, logically consistent. And that's what great players do. They don't allow unstatistical, assumptive thoughts to creep in and infiltrate their thought process. So I'd say those two things are definitely up there on the list. There'll be more, but I can't think of them right now off the top of my head.
That's an excellent answer. I hope maybe you can put more thought into that, because I think that's like great material for a book maybe. Or there's just a lot I think there is a lot that can be said, a lot more subtle points if you really thought about it or took your time considering it. There's plenty more that can be said about that.
Yeah, I think if you could hire me like a team of elves that could write books for me, I would happily like incorporate that. But I'm already writing a book right now, and I have so many ideas. You know, it's just like I'm like, where do I possibly find the time to write all of these books? Have you got any kind of idea how to build a machine that just stops time for 10 years? Any ideas? You ever built one of those? Because that would help me. I could write so
No,
many books.
no, I'm sure there's other smarter individuals who have tried, to accomplish something like that, and they might have achieved that already if it were possible.
Yeah, they're probably keeping it to themselves, though, right? So they can
That
write
could
all
be
the
too.
poker books in the world or something. Anyways, let's press on.
Yeah, you mentioned philosophy there, and
Hmm.
well, it was kind of a later question that I had on my list, but I was also a student of philosophy, so
Oh,
I think
cool.
just real quickly, what are some of your philosophical interests? Do you have any favorite books, favorite authors?
Um, I really like Bertrand Russell. He's kind of like my hero. He's just like the main man, right? He's just like, speaking of accessibility and clarity and logic, I think Russell is up
Mhm.
there. Um, who else do I like? I kind of like some of the old school stuff. Like I'm a bit partial to a bit of Aristotle or Plato, like virtue ethics. I find pretty interesting as well. And just ethics in general. Like I quite like that at university. Like just the applied ethics, theory of ethics. I wasn't so much into like the really obscure stuff. Like when you get to like metaphysics and things like that. Although it was like up my street logically, I just thought that there were more practical and important ways to use philosophy. So I guess I kind of like I'm more of like I enjoy reading like philosophy that's about like real world things rather than stipulating whether adjectives exist in the same sense that I don't know that bricks do or something like that. I don't really care so much about that side of it.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful element of philosophy is there is this practicable, practical element.
Yeah,
Then there's also the theoretical, critical element. And then there's an interesting blend on how you can work those two together.
yeah, definitely. I really liked philosophy. I just felt like I remember having the distinct sense of, is this ever going to make me any money? Like, am I ever going to be able to, I guess, like, to really practice philosophy? I mean, you can tell me your insights on this in a second, but I felt as if you had to kind of go full academic. You kind of had to go all in the academic path and maybe become a professor and just commit fully to that track. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one approach, probably the more respectable approach. Another one would be to just go full on, I don't know, like vagabonding in like the ancient classical sense. Like you're just a guy with the bare essentials living in, or maybe even kind of like a Henry David Thoreau type of way.
Yeah, totally. Like a bit like
You
that
know, just
movie Into the Wild. I don't know if you've seen that, where the guy just like takes off and tries to live off the land in Alaska and eventually like dies. But yeah,
maybe there's some, maybe this is more something we could talk about at a later time. But yeah, there's definitely complications with the philosophy degree and making money. That's for sure.
that said, though, as I've said in podcasts before, I did find that it helped me with poker because it helped iron out all of the irrational inconsistencies, in philosophy. Final point on this before we move on, but very often, like when I first started out in philosophy at university, I would think I was writing something great in an essay, and it would come back with like a C, and I would be like, oh, I don't understand why I got a C. I thought that was like really unique and novel, and it was just me making things up and not tying them together fully. So I think it's taught me like how to write, how to think, and how to teach as well, and how to play poker. So it's really weird to say that philosophy degree made me a good poker player, but it certainly was one ingredient there in the mix.
Excellent. And this is also a really good build up for my next question, which is kind of a personal question that I have right here on my list is what are your greatest values and principles?
Wow. My greatest values and principles. My greatest value is probably freedom. Like the idea that, like, I think one of the most upsetting and depressing things for me growing up was gradually becoming an adult and realizing that most of the people around me and myself at the time actually were doing things they didn't like, and were having to work long hours. I used to work in a casino. I used to be a dealer, a croupier, and I used to work like 10-hour shifts. I remember at one point I worked 9 of them in a row without a break, and this guy comes up to me. I'm dealing blackjack. It's like 4 in the morning. Like there's just a few drunk people in this casino. It's this casino in Edinburgh was in Scotland was one of the quietest casinos around. And this guy comes to my table as I'm dealing, and he says, I'm dealing to him for a while, and we're chatting away, and he's like, bro, what are you doing with your life? Like, why are you working in this place, like this dump? Like, what's happening? And I remember just being like, I don't know, like, I just don't have any better path right now. And that's just where I was at that point. And it was a lack of freedom. It was like I had to work this job to pay my rent, to then live, and then I didn't have time to look for a new job or go anywhere. And it's like a vicious cycle. And that anti-freedom, that idea that people are imprisoned in their normal life and have very, very little free time in between working hours and sleeping hours, which are both essential to survive, really depressed me, and it made me feel like this can't be all there is to life, and it made me feel this caged kind of way. So a big thing for me, like why freedom became such a big value to me, was that I lived that life of no freedom for a good part of my 20s, most of them actually, and then it wasn't until, like, I always knew poker would kind of be my savior. Like, I never lost faith that one day poker would save me from this idea that I didn't have a fulfilling way of gaining liberty or money. And eventually it did, because I put enough work into it, and eventually when I'd worked on myself and no longer had so many, like, I guess, psychological immaturity problems that were holding me back, and I was able to be a bit more responsible and mature and get my work ethic up there and be productive, when I started doing that, I was just like, yeah, of course, like, poker is the antidote. But I really feel for, like, people out there who haven't yet found, like, what they really want to do in life, and haven't yet found a way that they can actually structure their time the way they want to. So freedom for me, and the freedom to make choices, and the freedom to have enjoyment, and the freedom to not be told what to do all the time, and just be able to take a vacation whenever you want, and just little things like that. I think it's just so important to human happiness that it has to be, like, my number one kind of most important value. What was the second part of that question? Sorry, you said values and...
It was values and principles.
Principles. I don't know about principles. Like, I'm not really one to go around, like, branding mantras or slogans at people, but I don't know, man. Like, I guess principles would be...
Like, for example, like,
Yeah.
I have a principle. Like, I don't like to work with people who I can't see eye to eye with, right? If I don't see eye to eye with the people I'm with, that's just going to be an everyday thing. I just have I draw a line there. I don't work with people I don't see eye to eye with.
Okay, interesting. Do I have any principles like that? Regarding work, I have a few principles, like, that keep me actually productive. So one of them is that if it's a weekday and I don't have a coaching lesson, and it's not like a designated break time or lunch time or something like that, I have to produce something. And that might be an article. I write articles for PokerStars. It might be a podcast like this. It might be a training video for Run It Once or whatever. Or it might be just writing my book or working on whatever long-term project. So I tend to have the principle that I always have a series of short-term projects and long-term projects going, so that when there's a lull in coaching or there's a lull in playing, I don't feel like playing or whatever, I have something I can be getting on with. That's definitely one of my principles. Another one I would say is that I will do whatever I can to preserve my autonomy. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, but if there was any danger of me having to go out and get a job and work for somebody else, I would, like, destroy myself for probably like 80 hours a week for that not to happen. So yeah, I think it's kind of in line with the value part.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that. I find that incredibly motivating. Your mission to achieve freedom, and I think I kind of also share that value.
Cool. All right.
Another question I have here for you are, what are the best compliments you've ever received?
Generally, I'm quite, like, this is again a little bit personal, but I'm quite a needy person, in the sense that I like to feel appreciated and stuff like that. Like, I don't do very well with, like, being on my own and feeling like I'm just, like, feeling like unappreciated, I guess. So I'm an only child, and, like, when I was growing up and stuff like that, like, my parents had split up when I was 6 years old, so I was constantly bouncing from dad's house to mum's house and stuff like that, and trying to, like, find that, like, stability that children want and stuff like that. So I think that made me grow up to be, like, a little bit sort of needy in terms of, like, wanting to feel appreciated and stuff like that. And I think it's a big part of my happiness when people are appreciative, and when people say like, oh, that was really good what you did, or blah blah blah. So for me, the best compliments I've ever had are just stuff about my nature. They're like when someone says, oh, the Grinders Manual is great or something like that, I'm kind of like, oh, you know, that's great, I did put a lot of work into that, I appreciate that. But I think for some reason I get a lot more happiness out of people saying things to me like, this is like so arrogant and big-headed, right? But I really like it when people say things to me like, man, you're just like naturally articulate, or you're just naturally whatever. When people say that I'm good at what I do and what I want to be good at, that just makes me feel great. Like there's certain things I don't really care about being complimented about, but the ones that mean the most to me are like when people see like within me the unique parts of me that make me, I don't know, in a way special. Like everyone's special in a sense, right? Without getting overly corny about it. But when people see like the things that I'm especially good at and that stands out, and they can say, man, you've got these attributes. The number one thing that I take the most pride in is when people say to me like that I'm really articulate and I'm good at explaining things, because that's what I care the most about. Like I've always found that teaching others is just extremely beneficial, and that's the part of what I do that I think is actually good, like in a worldly sense as well, and it's not just like filling my wallet with cash, but it's also helping other people get meaning out of the poker industry and stuff like that. So when people praise my teaching and my articulation and stuff like that, I think it makes me feel way better, and it fills up my self-worth a lot more than people praising my work ethic or my poker skills or anything like that. I don't really care so much about those things. So yeah, I'm a needy child, awesome. Basically. Just tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm great.
I mean, is that something you've ever thought about before? Or, I mean, can you think like particular instances, a compliment you received from a particular person where you just kind of held on to that, like, you know, that was a great gift to hear from someone?
There's no like an individual instance of it that stands out. Like my girlfriend will tell me very often like, oh, you're very articulate, I wish I was articulate as you, and you know, that's awesome. I'm kind of desensitized to it because it comes from her and I get it all the time. But that's really, like, I think getting compliments from people you really care about and stuff, that actually means more to me than getting compliments from somebody I respect in the industry or whatever. Like I'm kind of a renegade. I try to kind of go my own path in the industry. If someone in the industry wants to say, oh, like I really like your work or whatever, then that's nice, that's flattering for sure. But like what means more to me is like the people around me that I love and care about seeing the worth in me and giving me compliments, I suppose. It's kind of strange. I'm just quite independent. I'm kind of like a lone vulture in that sense, that I will like build my own poker empire, kind of, so to speak. So if somebody else in the poker world is impressed by what I've done or vice versa, that's nice, and it's camaraderie and it's good to work with other people as well, but it doesn't mean half as much to me as like someone in life that I really care about. So yeah, it's kind of the guy I am, I suppose.
Excellent. Thanks for answering that. Okay, so my next question here for you is, what are students not doing to maximize their coaching experience?
Work in between sessions. Students have humans, I shouldn't say students, I say human beings are wired to be lazy, right? Like we have evolved in a sense that if we don't have to do something to survive, we will not do it because it will burn calories, it will expend energy, and it will put us in a more vulnerable situation in the future. So if a student thinks that, we also have this, as humans, I think we also have this weird correlation between money and worth, that if we throw money at something, it will necessarily generate value for us, and that doesn't work. Or if we put effort into something, we should generate money. Like we have this idea that money and worth are like intrinsically linked in some way, when they're not. Money is a means to choice, and it gives you more freedom to explore different routes of improving at something or getting better at something. Coaching very much fits into that category, that when students get coached, they give themselves access in a much more time efficient way to loads of concepts in a way that they can understand, and it's personally taught to them, that will allow them to actually grow. But they still have to do the growing. I'm just like the fertilizer, right? So they still have to understand how to move forward, how to work independently. And students need to be able to articulate things back to themselves and others flawlessly. They should not settle at, oh, what you said to me makes sense, I'm being spoon-fed all this stuff, and I'm just going to like, it's just going to go in one ear and out the other in a couple of weeks. It's going to be temporary learning. So if students did more revising of what we've done, like I build a PowerPoint for every student, and I will explain figures and stuff in there like really clearly. I'll lay it all out, and then the next week, like a student will show up for a lesson, And I'll say, okay, so this hand you've shown me here is a good example of what we talked about last week. Just run that by me again. Like, how does this process work? And the student might just be like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, so what you've done there is you've paid me for coaching, and that's up to you. I'll take your money anyway. I'm happy to take your money. It's my job, but I'd really like it if you got something out of it as well. And to get the most out of it, you have to actually sit down in between lessons and be like, right, I've been given all my tools. Let me build the thought paradigm out of those tools that my coach has given me, and then I'll show up at the next lesson able to articulate everything in my own words and just really apply it. There's such a huge, massive void between learning, hearing, and understanding, and then the side of learning that's actually use, production, application. And people fall short in that because they think that because they've thrown money at a coaching package that they just have to turn up and listen and then play poker and it'll just magically work. It won't.
All right, my next question. When approaching learning the game from an intermediate level, how useful are solvers and how much should they be used?
A good question might be how dangerous are solvers, and the answer to that is very. I don't know if you've ever used the solver, but when I first started out, you've not, right? When I first started out using solvers, I was just like, okay, so it's doing this, so I should do this, done. You can see how that'd be a problem, right? If you just look at it and try to copy it, and it's a really technically complicated grid of information. So solvers, I would say, have made the intermediate poker community far weaker than stronger. And the reason for that is the absolute butchering and misapplication of them. If you just pay a coach an hour of your time, of his time, 2 hours of his time, 3 hours if you want a really good run through, to show you how to use the solver properly, you can get yourself like one of the best tools out there. But you need to be shown what the limits of it are, what the applications of it are, and how to actually understand it theoretically and how to design inputs. If you can do those things, you can only take out of it a theoretical understanding and then apply to your game what you need to based on how the population plays. Like, let me put it this way. A solver tells you what should happen in perfect reality, like in a perfect reality where both players play optimally. So to actually try to copy that in the real world where no one plays optimally is not going to be the highest DV line, because if no one plays optimally, there's necessarily exploitative strategies out there to counter them. So instead of just saying PIO does this, I'm going to do this, or GTO plus does this, I'm going to do this, what you need to do is say solver A does X and solver B does Y. Why does solver A do X? Why does solver B do Y in response? Why do these hand groups do this? Why do these hand groups do this? By answering those questions, you're understanding factors that affect EV. And if you can build that understanding, you can go off on your own, look at a spot you've never seen before, and predict how the solver might handle it. And then you can make the next step of then saying, do I want to deviate from that idea based on how the population plays the spot? And at most stakes, in most games, you want to deviate in most situations. Not all, but most situations. The very common ones like c-betting, people are starting to get that right now at the higher stakes, and you may not have an immediate deviation there. But in any spot that's a bit more complicated, where there's been more factors and variables, and there's been more of a branching effect of possibilities, people are still wildly unbalanced. And so the game theory approach is not going to be sufficient after rake to give you that big of a win rate. But it will lay your foundations, and it will do well against a random strategy. But to really beat rake, which can be like 9 BBs, 10 BBs per 100, 11 at the lower micro stakes, you have to be deviating all the time. So if you actually learn to use the solver and just apply the stuff literally to like 10 NL, 25 NL, the chances are you'll be doing worse than what your natural exploitative game is if you're a strong player already. So solvers are dangerous, but the impact of them is huge if you know what you're doing and you're at a level where you can start to grasp the real, more complex game theory notions and then see how they all fit together and when to use them. But get someone to show you. Definitely pay for coaching to use a solver if you're going to use one. It'll save you so much time and effort.
Yeah, excellent answer. I think that's just really good advice. I'm really happy I asked you that.
Cool. How many is that we've done?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How many questions is that we've gotten through?
Oh, I scrambled the numbering. I don't have to count them real quick. Oh,
That's all
let
right.
me see.
Let's just continue. No
Okay.
worries.
Okay. I still have several here on the list.
Cool. I'll try and speed up my answers a little bit now.
Okay. Let me see here. What do you think are the most effective methods of practice and training?
Hand review and taking notes is really key, and then getting your notes analyzed by a coach. So not just getting like not just having your play analyzed. You shouldn't have done that. You should have done this instead. Okay, I won't do that again. I'll do this instead next time. You won't, because you haven't actually restructured your thought process. So getting feedback on a detailed thought process is much more valuable than just being told whether or not you should play a hand, for sure. So just detailed hand review with feedback is good. Live play, sit in, sit out is really good. So sort of having someone sweat you that's maybe a bit better than you, and or even a bit worse, it'll help you. Like, the more you articulate, the more you'll learn as well. I found that through teaching. So don't shy away from sweating weaker players necessarily, but when you're sweating with someone, so they're watching you play, just play like a couple of Zoom tables if you can, or even if it's regular tables, this will work as well, but less effectively. And sit out after like an interesting hand comes up and discuss it fully. Maybe even load up the solver and take a look and see if you can understand what's going on, and then sit back in, get another hand, sit back out, talk about it. That way you're really blending practice with working on your game. One of the reason I suggest these methods is that the biggest thing that goes wrong in teaching poker students is that out of game they can understand lots of stuff, but their ability to produce it is slow, cumbersome, kind of lethargic and just sloppy, and therefore when they come to play they just have like 3% of their out of game receptive understanding comes through in their actual productive decision making. So doing those two things, detailed hand review and with feedback, and sit in, sit out, review work, is going to really help bridge that void.
Excellent. Those are things that we do focus on quite a bit in the study group. And another thing that we try to focus on quite often is range building and like range strategies. Like say take c betting the flop, for example. What's your whole strategy here? Not just how you're going to play this hand.
Right.
Right. And
I think that's a really important point. Just sorry to interject. Just that's a really important point that you might not need to play all of your range right now in this spot. It might be sufficient to know what you need to do with this hand. However, that same spot is going to come up with another 600 different combos from the one you have right now, right? So you may as well start solving it more holistically while you're in the situation, irrespective of whether or not you're favoring balance in that scenario. So that's a really good point, Justin. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just to get good at the basics. So then when you flip that around to actually defending versus a c-bet, then you get into creating your check raising range.
Right.
And then you really want to spend some good time and detail on that to actually, actually have a good idea of what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve there.
Yeah, flipping it.
I think,
sorry.
Yeah, it can get as complicated and sophisticated almost as you want to make it once you start going through all three streets, and then you can build your strategy based on what might happen. If these are the hands I'm going to bet fold, these are the hands I'm going to bet call, these are the hands I'm going to jam over the top with. You can kind of really just go on and on with these range strategies. And I think initially it's something that is kind of difficult to get into, and there's kind of not really a whole lot of software, maybe not even a whole lot of material. That was one of my questions, other than your work, could you maybe recommend any other materials or resources that are along the same kind of building range strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I'm a little bit biased because I make training content there, but I think like Run It Once does just have like the best roster of poker instructors you can find on the internet. Like, in my opinion, by quite some distance, I don't think it's really close. And I'm not affiliated with them in the sense that I promote them or vice versa. I just make training content, but there's a lot of training content on there at different levels, and if you look hard enough and you ask in the right places, you will be able to find something for almost anything you want to do. I have a course on there called From the Ground Up, so that's been fairly popular since it came out, and it's more of a kind of, I guess, video, slightly more up-to-date version of the Grinder's Manual. But other than my stuff, like, I don't think that I don't think the poker book market is that huge. Like, I don't think there've been a ton of like really, you know, groundbreaking poker books recently or anything like that. People do churn out books. Some of them are good, but yeah, I think the best way to ingest new information is training content from instructors that you can relate to, that you're engaged by, and that you trust are strong players and who are articulate and can explain things well. And there's a number of people I would recommend on Run It Once who do that, you know, as well as I do or better. And then, yeah, I think just you only need, I think what you need in terms of taking in new information is somewhat limited. Like, I don't think you need to be this hungry, devouring poker kind of animal that just goes around gobbling up all the information it can find. What you get there is you get this belly full of like random information that eventually just implodes or explodes, and you just vomit it all everywhere, and you just kind of like collapse in a heap because you've just like taken in far too much. You've just gorged yourself on info. So I think you could, like, I think information is kind of important, but limiting how much you actually take in and making sure that you digest information you've taken in thoroughly before taking in more. So there are places to do that. There are good training sites out there, but do not just gorge on training site material. Like, make sure you do all of the stuff we just spoke about in the previous question as well.
Excellent. So moving on to the next question. When a player is moving up in stakes, what advice would you give to them about how they should deal with the initial challenges they will face?
I would say that mental game is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges, because playing for twice the amount of money all of a sudden is not going to be like necessarily a smooth transition. So to work on your mental game, I'd recommend a quick exercise. Just write down what you think are your 3 to 5 biggest types of tilt and give them a name. Like, what is it that the tilt is doing? Like, when, and then what I would recommend doing is writing down, firstly, for each type of tilt, what the trigger is, so what the trigger situation might be that might cause it. Secondly, you could think about how your brain is interpreting that situation that's causing the problem. For example, if there's a student that gets very annoyed or frustrated when people raise him or are aggressive and he feels threatened by it, the trigger would be villain raised me on the turn or whatever. The interpretation there would be I'm under attack, and that is the central paradigm thought that is wrong, is the interpretation. And then after the interpretation we have what's called the response program, which is run, which would be like fight, like go all in, call, whatever, fight for the pot, don't fold, even if he perhaps should. So if you start categorizing your mental game based on triggers, bad interpretations of those triggers that are problematic, and then the responses that follow those triggers, I think you'll go a long way to actually fixing some of those mental game leaks and coming to understand them better. And the book that I'm writing right now is called Poker Therapy, and it's very much about understanding all of the different leaks that poker players can have mentally, what causes them, why they exist, what the bad interpretation of the poker situation is, and then how to fix that. So I think that book will help, but mental game is probably the biggest thing when moving up in stakes. Another thing that might be kind of problematic is just like the higher skill level, and certain exploits that you were using at lower stakes may not work as effectively against the regs at the higher stakes. So you might have to remain slightly more inside a game theory fortress. Not saying play full blown solver GTO, but maybe remain a bit more inside the game theory fortress until you've figured out how effective certain things are against that new population.
Great answer. I have another question here that's kind of along the lines of the mental game. I think I heard you say before that the mental game was by far your greatest challenge.
Yeah.
Maybe you could give some specific examples of like what you found were your greatest faults, and maybe some of the methods or techniques that you availed yourself of to overcome those faults.
Yeah, I mean, how did I overcome my faults as a poker player in the mental game? Started coaching a lot more and not playing as much poker. That's definitely it. That's not the best way of doing it, just run away from your problems. But initially, when I got into coaching, it was because I was feeling like I wanted to coach already, but when I started putting loads of effort into promoting coaching in my coaching business, it was because I wanted to reduce my volume, right? I didn't want to play as much because it was kind of driving me crazy. It was making me like really like long-term tilted at one point, I would say. Like, it was my own fault because what had happened was the GTO boom had came out about 2013, and my game was just not very good. Like it used to be good before then. It was good pre 2013, but when the GTO boom happened, I started getting obsessed with game theory. Didn't understand it fully. Didn't understand what was going on. Over applied it. Kind of just became one of those dreaded game theory fish that just like wanted to be game theory optimal but couldn't. And so I lost sight of like so many important concepts that related to EVs, so many good exploitative notions, that kind of thing. And when that happened, I just lost confidence in my game, and I was suffering from like a long-term tilt is a good way to put it. Like the idea that when I fire up a session, things are going to go wrong and I'm going to lose control because I'm not sure what's happening anymore. So I think that's a very real danger, you know, like that if that can happen to me, and I was already an established player then, you know, I'd been playing for a few years, I'd been successful in the 3 years leading up to that, I'd been playing professionally, and then for that to happen to me, I was kind of just like, oh my god, I'm just not as good at this game as I thought. I just don't have the ability anymore to do it. But it wasn't that, it was that I'd misprioritized. But my mental game had taken a huge hit because of that, and I'd say that the worst type of tilt I've ever suffered from was this sense of not being good enough tilt, this sense of inadequacy, and that made me extremely illogical and irrational in game, and that defensiveness is just like so hard to combat without getting to the core of it. So for me to actually fix that, I had to actually take a step back, play a bit less poker, stop playing full time, went away and taught English for a while instead in Italy, and lived there for a bit and did some coaching but didn't really do much poker. And then when I came back to the game after that, I suddenly had an epiphany. Like I'd stepped away enough to see that all the game theory stuff I was bombarding myself with was just not right, and there was a lot of really bad game theory that was floating about at that time in 2013, 2014. But now here we are in 2019, I'd say my game is stronger than it has ever been, and not even by a little bit, but it is like absolutely crushing. Like 2019 me would annihilate 2014 me, like it's not even close. And my mental game these days, much, much better. And that's because when you have confidence in what you're doing and you know that you're working on the right things and you can see how it all fits together, I'm not saying you don't need to work on your mental game separately, because you do, but if you have the right technical approach and you're learning the right things in good detail, it's kind of hard to get that inadequate, lost, confused long-term tilt. You can get other types of tilt, and another one, I'll finish up with this type of tilt in response to your question, is that even before 2013, if we go back to 2010, I was a successful player playing 200 NL online. I made quite a bit of money doing that back in that time. Games were soft back then, and I played full-time professionally, and I did really well. I studied every day. I was at university, but it was only second year philosophy, so as you'll probably know, not that difficult to survive in second year philosophy, at least not here. And so I just spent all this time studying and working on my game, and yet my mental game cost me so much money. And the form of tilt that cost me so much money was this like gambly, degenerative, like I have to call even though I know I shouldn't. I have to click the call button. I have to invest. I just wasn't okay with the chance of not winning the pot. And that was caused by when I was even younger, so years before that, I would like go to casinos and be an idiot and play roulette. And I was just really reckless with money back then. Like I didn't have that much money, but I was reckless with it, and it was ingrained in me to just like be an idiot with money, basically. And so when I started playing poker, I couldn't resist the temptation to just call things in case I won, just to have that chance of winning. And I used to hate it. I'd make the call, and then I remember one time, I always tell the story on streams and stuff like that because it's funny now, but I actually like hit myself in the face like pretty hard one time because I made a call that I knew was bad. So if you imagine like what is now a successful professional 10 years ago slapping himself full force in the face because he made a bad call, it almost doesn't even compute. It's just like, who was that guy? But that was like a young version of me that had some emotional problems, had some anger issues, and just could not stop pressing the call button in spots where I knew I shouldn't. And I still won with it. That was the thing. I could still win because the rest of my game was so good relative to the competition. But I'd have won a lot more if I'd addressed that leak sooner. And the way to do that would have been understanding where it comes from. Much like in Poker Therapy, the book I'm working on. If I'd understood at the time that the impulse to call came from an attachment to resources and to this idea of getting a thrill from winning, And I traced that kind of mental programming and that interpretation of the spot as, here's a chance for me to win money, and I must have a chance to win at all costs to seek that thrill. I could have addressed the causes of that thrill. Well, why am I thrill seeking? What's missing? Like, what's going on? Like, why am I not deriving pleasure out of just the decision making? I could have addressed it. I could have like found a way to rewire that interpretation of facing a bet. But because I had such a bad interpretation of facing a bet emotionally, which was, here's a chance for me to win, I just couldn't fold. And I was College Station in 2010, and I could win being a College Station, so I got away with it. It's like the spoiled kid that can act up and still get what he wants. So, and it never went away. I never got fully punished for it. But then when the games got tougher, I had to really fix that leak, because it was killing me. And the way that I fixed it was, I changed my interpretation over time, and I visualized different interpretations. And when I faced the bet, I practiced literally day in, day out the technique of seeing that bet as a potential investment that was up to me to decide if I wanted to make, and not as a chance to not lose money or a chance to win money. So I think like when you see something as a potential investment, you're going to weigh up whether you should take that investment. Whereas when you see it as, can I just win here? Do I have a chance of like getting a thrill from winning? It's going to set you on a really bad path. So interpretation is everything. And that's why my book, Poker Therapy, that will be out in a couple of months on carrotcorner.com. Check out the other books on the store, guys, if you're interested in the stuff I've written so far. That's why that book is focused on rewiring bad interpretations of poker situations that humans have, and not on sleep well, get up on time, eat a good breakfast. It's nothing like that. It's all about, how do I change that faulty interpretation that's leading me down that bad path?
Well, I gotta say, I'm really looking forward to that new book, and I was already thinking, this is Carruthers. He's gonna have a new approach. There's gonna be some really good, just new stuff here that's gonna be real valuable. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I just think this is something we stress a lot around the study group. And if you think in terms of, what's an area of my game where I can make the most improvements, and this is something that's true for me, and I think it's certainly the way you were describing is true for you. You're able to make a bunch of improvements in that area.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that's typical of a lot of players? I mean, are a lot of players are taking this more serious nowadays, or is this still something that people are slacking in?
I think they are still slacking a little bit, because people are they're so obsessed with the technical game. They just want to be like the master. They want to be like, I am more intelligent. I'm better than that reg. I understand stuff more than that reg. And they don't want to accept that within them, they have human wiring that they can't avoid that makes them make bad choices. They can't accept that. Not because they are like stubborn or too proud, but because they just don't want to address it in the first place. They don't want to look at that part of the problem. So until you face up to the fact that human beings are not wired to thrive in poker, which is a different world, I call it the alien world problem in my new book, until you accept that poker is an alien world that will make you malfunction in all sorts of ways, mental game wise, you're not going to fix it, because people have this ridiculous black and white view of the mental game where they'll say either A, I don't have mental game problems, I'm just a poker robot and I'm fine, probably false, or B, my problems are that I'm an idiot and I tilt even though I shouldn't, also ridiculous and doesn't address where the problem comes from. So people have this black and white view. It's either they don't have a problem, or the problem is just silly and emotional and they shouldn't have it, so they dismiss it. Both of those approaches are going to get you completely destroyed mental game wise, and you're just going to build bad habits. So how about something in between? How about when I tilt, it's not because I'm an absolute maniac or I need like medication, or it's because I'm an emotional wreck. No, it's not that. It's just that I have wiring that malfunctions in poker. Let me address that wiring. So that's the premise of the book. I just wish people would, the reason I've written the book is I want people to see that every human being is not wired for poker and can fix themselves so that they're wired better, and not just, oh, we shouldn't tilt, it's silly to tilt. It's ridiculous. Like, if you're put in an environment you're not evolved to handle, of course you're going to tilt, of course you're going to malfunction.
Excellent answer. And I'm sorry if you already mentioned it. Can you just say it again, when we can expect that book to be out?
It kind of depends how quickly I get through the rest of it, but I'm really hoping by October sort of time. I'm going to keep you guys posted, though. There'll be another podcast in a couple of weeks, and I'll let you know how the progress is going. I'm actually about to go on vacation, so needless to say, I'm not going to be sitting it's like a stag do I'm going on, so I'm not going to be like sitting in the bar writing Poker Therapy while everyone else is getting drunk. But when I come back, I'm going to grab the bull by the horns and try and get this finished for you guys. So I really hope about October. But I'll let you know.
Okay.
Check out carrotcorner.com for updates as well. As soon as it's ready, it'll be on there. It'll also be available on Amazon as an ebook.
Excellent. So I think I just highlighted my last 2 questions here. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Sure, let's run through them real fast and then we'll wrap up.
Certainly. So this next question I have for you, one of the most important skills a player should have as they move up is the ability to bet for thin value. How would you advise your students on building the skill?
Look for spots where a villain's range is so capped in the first place that even if he doesn't call you with that many worse hands, your equity when called is still high due to the lack of better hands in his range. So spots where you've got such high equity that it doesn't even matter if he usually folds better hands, there's not enough worse stuff in there to punish you. So in other words, value bet much thinner against capped ranges.
And while you're using that as strategy, what kind of sizing do you think is preferable for a situation like that?
People
do you
have
think a small sizing kind of targeting a weak calling range, or do you think maybe go ahead and use a larger sizing that just kind of takes advantage of the natural equity lead that your range has versus their lead?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. I mean, if their range is capped and they have a lot of bluff captures and your range contains strong hands and bluffs, you want the size bigger. This idea that because I have a weak absolute hand strength hand, therefore I should bet small. This is really fundamentally flawed because absolute hand strength means nothing. If I get to the river with second pair top kicker and you've checked all the way there, you can't have a better hand than me if you're a strong player, really. So if I get there with second pair top kicker, I'm not going to bet 1/3 pot because, I have second pair. I'm going to bomb it because I'm also bluffing like 6 high there. And my ace jack second pair and the king jack 5-3-3 is actually nutted in relation to your range. So I should size big. The small bet is more of an exploitative thing. I would small bet more in spots where I thought my range was perceived to have no bluffs or where I would struggle to fit bluffs into my range due to the run out. Generally, if everything completed, it might be difficult for me to value bet with a bomb size bet, basically.
Gotcha. Great answer. Okay, so this is the last question I'm going to ask. And it is, would you at all consider coaching a small group of players working through concepts? Or do you only consider one-on-one coaching and then maybe something like a curriculum based over like a certain amount of weeks?
I would be really happy to do that, and if you have a study group who are looking for group coaching, I would just say work out how many people want to take part in it, contact me, and I'll give you a rate. My group coaching rate's a bit higher, but it's not like massively higher, it's not like totally unreasonable, and it is better value for money. So if you're out there listening to this podcast and you have a group of people and you think that you would like to get coached in that kind of curriculum based way, go ahead and just send me an email, admin@carrotcorner.com, or add me on Skype as characters, and we can set it up. I'd say the same to you, Justin. I'd say the same to anyone else out there who's in your same situation that's working with a poker group and you're looking to get coached by the same guy. For all coaching packages for one-on-one, check out carrotcorner.com/coaching or go to the coaching part of my site.
Okay, so you have some experience with that kind of teaching.
Yeah.
You know, how do you go about actually designing the curriculum, and what kind of material or what kind of, what's a good focus for multiple players? Like, this isn't a one-on-one thing. We might not be able to get too deeply involved in a certain aspect of an individual's game. So how would that work best?
Well, what we tend to do in that situation is we gauge the level first of all. So if in your group there's 5 guys and you're all playing 10-0 or 25-0, I'll kind of know where I need to start. I want to know like how well you're doing at those stakes as well, just so I get an idea of your skill level. And if I can get a backstory from the group as to what stuff you understand, what stuff you think is lacking, like what things you spent more time on, less time on, I will design the syllabus independently. So I would never have a syllabus that I would teach every poker student. There's certain elements that are fairly rigid and will show up in most people's curriculum, but most of the time in the curriculum, I'm going to keep it flexible for the group. So the first thing to do would be to send me that information, and then I would design it from there. But yeah, you're right, we wouldn't be digging into one person's game all the time or anything like that. We'd more be telling you to prepare a hand each on a certain topic, then we do the theory, then we do like the hand review on everybody's hand one at a time or something like that. So there still is theory and practice. It wouldn't be completely classroom. There'd still be some hand review, but things we would avoid doing would be like, you know, a sweat with one person playing and 5 people watching. I think you start to lose a lot of efficiency in that format when you do something like that.
Right. No, I think the combined efforts of everyone just does the same practice, or everyone does the same assignment, and then that just provides a whole ton of kind of like a compare and contrast and alternating viewpoints. Or
yeah,
I think that seems like a really good way to learn.
Definitely. Right, anyway, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. Those were really interesting questions, and I was relieved to see that the random guy was not like pranking me and did have some really good questions to ask me. So I think it's been wholly worthwhile, and I'd love to have your group or a representative from your group back on in the future, maybe a year from now, whatever, when the game has changed, with a new set of questions if you're up for it.
Absolutely. Wow, thanks again for having me on.
My pleasure, man. All the best in your poker journey, and for you guys out there, Poker Therapy will be out hopefully October, like I say. In the meantime, we have Pile versus Population. 4 episodes of that are out there if you're interested in that question about how to use a solver. That's your best starting point. Check out carrotcorner.com, and you can also pick up the Grinders Manual, the ultimate textbook to the game, and also 100 Hands, the more advanced companion to that. So hopefully I will see you guys on the next podcast in a couple of weeks. I already have some ideas what I'm going to be talking about. And until then, run good. Good luck at the tables. This has been Pete Clark with Justin the Random Guy, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye bye for now.